Good morning, dear colleagues. Today it's such an unusual day. Perhaps some of you know today is the 21st century, 21st year, and 21st day. Everything is so symbolic, and it's on such a day, 21st century, 21st year, and 21st day, that we want to open our annual conference on lifelong learning. And this year, I would like to say that it is dedicated to a special approach, a special view, how we should be moving towards new questions of competence and literacies of the new education system. This conference is ongoing. It happens every year. For the second year, we've been talking about competences, and that's where we're going to be moving. I would like to congratulate on the behalf of our committee, of our program committee, all the participants, and it's extremely pleasant that this year 1,400 people got registered to participate in our conference from 25 countries. I will quickly enumerate these countries because, dear colleagues, it's extremely pleasant for us that you can see us online, you can see us on YouTube in MS Teams, and perhaps you will be able to see us further in, in the recording mode. We'll see the record of it. So many countries: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Mongolia, Norway, Slovakia, the United States of America, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Switzerland, Estonia, and so many other countries. So this is really very special. And 32 regions of Russia as well participate in our conference. Several issues of organization, so that we will be able to understand and logically see how this conference will be going. It will last for 2 days. There are different formats. It's plenary sessions and workshops and master classes, sections that will go in several stages. First, we will work separately at the stages. Then we will have platforms of negotiations that will be broken down to several sections, and at the end we will take the results of our work for the plenary sessions. Several questions about our plenary sessions. First of all, it's important for me to inform the participants and the speakers about how it will be. We've already tried the following format. After every plenary talk, we select perhaps one question, maybe two important questions, and that's what our moderators are working both on YouTube and here. And then we ask these questions of the speaker. And this will be interesting questions, interesting conversations. We have little time, so we cannot ask any more than one question. And at the end of every talk, every session will have a panel discussion, so that the participants do not only think about their own talk, but also about how the other talks went and how they're connected to their own. If we do not have enough time for tracks, we have to psychologically kind of prepare for that, because the first track was really a little bit overloaded, and the second one will be probably shorter and less. So if we do not have time for this, we will just move the general discussion to the second track. So those are basic organizational issues. So I would like to wish all of us good luck, both us and about 20 countries that participate in this, more than 1,000 participants that would like to continue with this. I would like to wish luck and a little bit success, and here we go. So first I would like to turn the floor to our rector, rector of the Moscow Pedagogical University, Doctor of Pedagogical Science, Igor Mikhailovich Marenko. Good morning, dear colleagues. Now I would like to show you some slides. Yes. All right. Here is what I would like to start from. I will enlarge it a little bit. So you can see it. All right. Yes, we can. It's fine. Good morning, dear colleagues, once again. And I'm so happy that this conference is happening. These questions are extremely important. The geography of this issue is getting larger and larger, and we're entering the third decade of the 20th century. And the citizens of the Russian Federation really would like to become part of this educational process. So, frankly, I was really surprised when I could see the issue of literacy so connected with lifelong learning. Why was I so surprised? Because in the history of education, everything related to literacy has always been quite untrivial and in some way painful, I would say. This spring we remember that classic degree of Sovdarkom of the year 1919 about elimination of literacy. And at that point, the issue was that all citizens had to learn to read and to write. And well, yes, to read and to write. That was the issue. And those were the main objectives of the first decree of Sovnarkom. It came out in December of that year. And why did we compare it with our spring situation? Was because the issue, the list of measures that were taken at that time were really quite similar to the measures were quite similar to those that we had to take last spring because of the COVID pandemic. In order to acquire literacy, all population had to start learning, and the local authorities had to provide special premises, be that culture clubs or private houses or some kind of churches, even any kind of premises, where during the working week they had to let the workers go to study there while preserving their salary so that they would be able to learn there, to read, to write, to have time to do that. And special authorities had to satisfy their needs, to satisfy their applications for that. And if somehow the employer would somehow put some kind of barriers on that way, the employer could be even criminally persecuted. Criminally. So can you imagine that? So that complex of measures for the sake of literacy, well, it was, I would say, it was quite looked upon from another point of view. It was it was not just the issue of lifelong learning. Of course, the way we look at lifelong learning, well, we imagine immediately some grandmothers during the pension years who came to learn, to study, and well, we are telling them about literacy. No, here it's until the pension age, everything is quite quite toughly regulated in terms of not providing these products. And of course, the agenda of literacy has to change. And I'm so happy that we participated in that. And of course, the issue of literacy, well, can be interpreted in different ways. Should we even consider literacies in plural? Is it correct to be considering it like this? And well, there's different types of literacy: information literacy, financial literacy, and so on. Well, here I would like to formulate it like this. There will be like three questions here that are extremely important from my point of view. The first issue is, do we even need literacies in lifelong learning? Or are they only the issue of competition? What is it that I'm talking about? Well, in obligatory levels of education, if we talk about like general education, for example, which according to our legislation, if for example the family doesn't provide it, well, very serious implications, legal implications may follow, even to the point of the kid being taken away from the parents, from their custody. So this is an important issue. The education that is oriented on particular, very particular requirements. Shall we even talk about literacy here? Because the institutions that see in those needs, in those requirements, some kind of literacy, what they do based on their research, based on their educational programs, what they aspire for. They aspire for particular, empty spots. They will be required by the kids. That the fact that they found a particular interest, they found particular empty spots. Well, that will be enough. And so maybe we're talking about the fact that those working at the market of lifelong learning, for them it's extremely important to speak and agree about particular milestones, particular criteria related to lifelong learning. And this doesn't come as a surprise. It's not accidental, because here, of course, we can talk about differentiation between competences and literacy, but I will not dwell on that. But we can see that different subjects of lifelong learning, they try to agree with each other, among each other, and this is not just the issue of competence, but kind of win situation. When we agree, it's kind of symbiosis. We agree, we will both succeed. So either we have to talk about something and agree that different agents of education have to kind of amplify, to augment each other, or there's no agreement at all. So the second issue is how the objectives are related to the technology of education. Why is it important? Because if we're talking about some kind of qualities of education, about some set of qualities, okay, we agreed about that, competences perhaps, then what is the technology that brings that? We cannot directly teach that. I can tell you, there's a seminar that I really recommend you to take a look at. You can see it on Facebook in the Higher School of Economics, where Florian Anderson was invited, who continues to develop the ideas of Benjamin Bloom. He was one of the disciples of Bloom, and he said that the main complaint about, well, Bloom's concept was that the main hierarchy of education somehow became the ground for education, for the structuring education. First it should be knowledge, then understanding, and then application. Of course, it's not exactly like this, and Bloom was kind of building that based on other objectives, on other tasks, including the task of evaluation, of marking, how those on the education board are functioning, how they're working. But this is a main question that kind of formulates some kind of ideas about technology and how these technologies are related to the educational process, what methodology we can be using here. And the third issue is, well, that we should also not neglect, that there is a huge number of automated environments here that that they have to be providing stimulus of what to be learning. So what do we do with that? Let them compete with each other, perhaps we can say that. Or shall we, as researchers, as a university here, after all, maybe we should understand just what influence on the individual, on that technology has, how that technology actually operates. And perhaps, yes, we have to understand how this works and how it is implemented, those instruments, those tools, how they're connected with each other, what pedagogical context is hiding behind it, and what particular results it can bring, what kind of literacy actually it is that we're talking about, based on how we formulate our conference, this is going to develop. Or is it also some kind of murky business and we don't want to connect with that, it's not our issue? Well, so this is the perhaps the spectrum of issues that should be formulated as an agenda of our conference. And I'm so happy that this topic is really so interesting for so many of you, and I really would like to wish you all the good things.
Thank you very much, Igor Mikhailovich. It was a great talk. It had a discussion, and even when we invited different speakers, we invited them with different kind of questions. These three questions are very important. Yes. The next speaker is by Kirill Baranik. Returning to Kirill Baranik. Very interesting topic. Well, it's about unexpected contexts of universities and schools for new literacy. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this conference. And I would like to give some ideas about unexpected contexts in the universities. For the time of presentation, I will switch off the presentation because technical problems. I would like to start from 2 sentences, but it's not about just my sentences. My idea is about 2 formats. The first thing is that let's not hurry. I would like to suggest to conduct this conference in a slower format, unhurried, because there's questions here that are important. We have to get into depth this question. It's not quite this context. We have to get into this deep, and we have to think about what to action, what ideas to activize, to make real. It's only then that we will be able to bring real understanding about what lifelong learning education is and how it's organized, and all these important questions that we should talk about. So, based on my education, I have to tell 3 stories. So there's 3 cases here, 3 stories that I would like to tell you about. 3 important questions. The first story is that I'm going to tell you about is the story about the subject approach in education. What is the category of subject approach, subject? Actually, this goes back to the previous century, even the end of the 20th century. It was connected to a very famous Hindu researcher, Sugata, educational researcher. He was known as one person who conducted one of the big experiments that he conducted, and the idea was in poor outskirts of Delhi, they installed terminals. You can see it in the picture, and it was connected to the internet. And there was various applications with the help of which various operations could be performed. But at the same time, there were no instructions, no teachers related to these terminals. No one would teach kids to use it. So the key hypothesis was that kids will be able to self-organize into communities that will actually provide education for themselves. They will be able to use it themselves. And this hypothesis was confirmed. There were many books written about this concept and this project. So this story became very, very actual, very real, not only for the research community and education, for educators themselves as well. Certain educational space that was created, and the idea was let's not bother children in their process of self-education and self-learning. And this is a real story. It's a network of schools in around the world, school in the cloud, so to speak, work according to this principle. And you can see that there's 5 main points here. Starting in this big question, it's any kind of environment is putting big questions, certain challenges, big problems in life. After that, children can break down in groups by themselves. They can use different sources of information, the internet, books or the internet or whatever. And at the end, they have to create a certain project that will solve the original challenge that was put in front of them. So you can see the structure of this organization here. You can see that there's a block that is connected to the itself trajectory, and 35 minutes is allocated to that for their self-organization. The other part, left and right, are a little small in the review. So this is how you can construct technology education. There's other examples of this. There's an example startup. The American Project Learning and the Finnish Project NT. The idea is that children not only move in the educational space career, but they work in digital environments. This analyzes it, and they actually be able to go around with that, and so they construct their own. I have to tell you that basically the idea of educational constructors is working at any particular. For example, the Australian curriculum, and it doesn't exist as a particular sort of book that was published, specifically for that. The idea is that it consists of different small elements, the content competences, and the teacher, based on the system, it has personal national curriculum, national standard. There is great variativeness. Everyone is done according to his own interest and his own trajectory. This is a system that we're growing recently, and personalized education, as it's called, adaptive education. Stories that would have a huge number of various possible solutions that create certain systems which we can find our own trajectory. And basically, this idea was augmented it was enhanced by this new situation related to the coronavirus pandemic, and it became really very much part of our life. You can see in the slide that more than billion and a half children around the world have been affected by the pandemics, and they have to, whether we want it or not, have to this these systems of education. And of course, in this case, the individual trajectory of education, individual choice and movement about this system is becoming extremely important. The idea is that the content of education, as well as programs, as well as the educational process, is a dynamic construct. It's a dynamic construct in which the main role belongs to the particular person. It's important to understand that when thinking about this lifelong learning, we have to understand that it has very, very big importance here. And the next question is a story about the case the higher education. It's related to the next project, the Minerva project, the education. The main idea is full on online university. So in this case, you don't have personal communication, personal meetings. These people can be mostly the work is done in online platform, but can be living in the same campus, the same place. And the main model is so-called reverse class seminar seminar communication and total absence of lectures. There's there's no lectures actually. There's certain like courses that are this material was in the plan given to students in advance, and then during the living during the actual online meetings, discussion takes place. Discussion. Then the next idea is a specialized digital platform that allows as part of education, and of course gathers a huge number of various educational materials, educational platforms. And the important question here is that we gather a lot of data about students. In Minerva, we do not have final exams. We have, instead of that, we have certain results in the portfolio based on which they final, final mark student. There's a lot of ideas here. Minerva, it focuses its methodology on the development of very activities based on various competencies. This is the competence that is given here. You can see the four main blocks of competencies here. And we can see that every competence is not just in a particular box, in a particular compartment, but it's further subdivided sub-competencies that are even further analyzed. If you actually look at the structure, you have the similarity with the typical four main competence structure of the 21st century, as it's given here. But it's not only just that main model, the general competence, but it's about how inside itself it opens up into a particular structure and what particular actions it involves. It's four blocks of competence. You can see each of these blocks is divided into small blocks. For example, critical thinking is divided into three subgroups with sub-actions, the evaluation of assertments and demands, assertions. For example, here you have in this book, in other books, you have particular educational result. You should use the evaluation so that you could understand if the quantitative assertions are operations. It's divided into two groups, habits and concepts. Habits of mind are certain competences that can be done automatically. it's the higher order functions that are done actually automatically. But when we're talking about concepts, we're talking about using knowledge. Uh, and, a very important question is how we integrate these two areas. Of course, this story of context is not so important now. Maybe they used to say, if we get out of the academic idea today, we understand that it's happening in a different day. The idea is to integrate this activity. Well, we have to understand that in Minerva, there's a question, big questions, big challenges they cannot work, and you can see that these are important questions that are related to cognitive knowledge, and of course how this educational process is organized. This is really important. Here you can see 4 years of bachelor preparation, and you can see that there's several elements here. The first idea of education is cornerstone courses at for very interesting courses that then not only immersion in the beginning part, the general knowledge of habits, and the second year is the history related to major. It's like big blocks of the united format, major, double major, and then these stories begin to integrate into a general capstone project, which is the 4th year. And there's also parallel courses here that are related to research, to self-education. So why this is so important? Well, it's so important because it's attempt to understand how the proportion is organized as a combination of knowledge, combination of students to content, and this is one of the challenges. And this is the question of monopolies. It's if we look at education here, well, if you see the number of families that learn outside of schools at home, for example, here's the U.S. statistics from 1998, 2018. Well, it kind of it goes from 850 to 1069. You see that the increase is very large. In the year in the 70s, there were only 13,000 families living outside of schools. And you can see how many of them increased in the following years. Well, we understand that more and more education gets out of the school limits, becomes interesting. And we can understand that this really works very well. This is a global school. and you can see that students change their country, and it's not only the question of social cultural environment and using social cultural environment. It happens in museums, in various companies, in the streets, in the parks, and everything is the subject of education. So it goes. So we understand that this basic format is well, it's not divided by subjects. It's a certain location division. It's sort of traditional. And another school that we can suggest is it's not that the children go out and go by the program, and it has certain workshop kind of verification taking place right for school, and here you can see that children are unified in specific formats, in particular age groups, and that's how they learn. And again, there's certain project that we have to perform. So the questions are really important here, and the key position of both schools and universities. Uh, so the question is a very particular continuum of communication. Uh, yeah, we're talking about creating ecosystem where both kids and adults will be able to navigate. And I would like to finish with the idea. Uh, so that's the final idea. Well, I have to tell you that even though we have uh, to we're limited time, but you can ask particular questions. Uh, uh, I have 4 questions here, and the main question. So the critics of academic approach. Uh, so the questions of the shortage of practical orientation and the idea of balance of activities and academic questions. So thank you very much for the questions. It's a good idea to reflect on this issue. So I have to speak about the particular content here. That how did the story started? For a while, we have to deal with two important approaches, and when we have to refocus the education from activities to results, yes, to particular activities, and then to particular activities. So this starts in the 90s of the previous century, and it's related to a lot of research around the world. And at the beginning of the year 2000, well, the competence approach came to education. Well, the competence approach started getting into this area, and then the pendulum begins to swing. The idea is that the most important thing in education is forming particular activities, and the content is unnecessary to be formed. Well, everything should be oriented on results. It lasted for a while, but then the idea came about that we're losing the academic nature of education in this case, losing what traditionally always formed educational concepts. And of course, there's lots of conferences at this point. And the catching of big ideas that started in Canada. And the key one here is let's try to represent this subject that is essentially it's the catching of big idea. Let's start there. It's can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you see my screen?
Roka, please, you can start.
Yes? Okay, thank you. Okay. Perfect. Can you hear me and can you see my screen? Understand if you can. Is visible my screen?
Yes, all is good.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Well, okay. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Доброе утро всем. I try to suggest to share some of my experience in terms of futures literacy application as a bridge between literacies and a tool for educational ecosystems. I am a lecturer in system dynamics and future studies methodologies at University of Trento, but also have experience as a trainer and environmental educator. And so I have several opportunities to make experimentation in different level of schools, from kindergarten to the higher level of PhD students courses. Just to have, well, about futures literacy. Just recall the key concept of my presentation, futures literacy. Composed by two terms, literacy is about how to read, how to write, everyone, the basic skills that we all acquired during the years of compulsory schooling. And it's also a fundamental source of freedom for a million people, because as we know, to read, write, everyone is able to express an idea, to collect information, and to develop a point of view, a own point of view. The contrary, a person that today cannot read and write using the tools is socially marginalized. Well, the question is about if while the traditional form of literacy remains essential, the question is whether they are sufficient to deal with challenges of the 21st century, with disruptive event, disruptive innovation. In this kind of context, the past is no longer able to shoot away. It is not enough to take a decision, to take a position in dealing with novelties, news, different thing, respect of the past. And so if the past is no longer enough, what remains is looking to the future. And so future is about a source of information, as a wide information base that people need to orient themselves with it increasingly uncertain context of accelerating changes. And using a common, shared definition, future literacy, the fusion or the merging of this concept is the ability to use the future actively in the present. Of course, as other form, traditional form, futures literacy require, as I said, is a tool of freedom that enables people to orient themselves, develop an opinion, take a position, and defend their dignity. Take a position in terms of take scenarios, take a shared desirable future, and so strategize the uncertainties, as I call, or take a decision future-oriented based on awareness of different possible futures. This is about. Future literacy imply the acquisition of certain skills. Those are necessary to distinguishing among different types of futures, to identify different ways to use the future in the present. Could be future literacy could be divided in three levels: awareness about discussion about the future, discovery, opening up possibilities, broadening the cone, the variety of possible futures or thinkable futures, and choice, using this information to make a choice, to initiate an action. So reformulating is probably how to apply solution to the values. These levels are connected with foresight skills, foresight practice. The other authors divided in six items, six levels, from framing, defining focal issue, scanning, exploring signals of change, featuring, identify baseline and alternative futures, and visioning. Among these possible futures, define the preferred, the desirable futures, and then design prototypes, artifacts, projects, plans to achieve these goals, to achieve the preferable future, and adapting the strategy along they are developing and matching with the novelties not foreseen before. Future literacy as a tool for that enabling that enhance teaching. So can be considered a didactic tool and a paradigm that enhances the teaching and learning of the usual discipline. It relies on key concept. It brings specific concepts and stimulate specific and help specific application. Key concept. These are examples, of course, not a complete list, but key concept is about life, space, community, resources, time, really deep concept, interested and involved in any discipline. And the future literacy bring specific concepts that are interdisciplinary, involving a variety of perspectives, cause-effect relationships, scales, beyond the matter and the matter and the energy, the values expectation affecting the system, affecting the development of different futures. And so system structures and functions, stability and change. This is particular specific concept explore and better define within future literacy. And this application stimulates to ask questions, to better framing problems, to develop and use models, mental models or mathematical models, but models of a reality by which we can simulate the dynamics and the effect of our intervention. So ameliorate, he planned the search, interpreted the data, used computational and mathematical thinking, structuring explanation, design a solution, and obtain, evaluate, communicate information. Many things we already saw in the previous presentation. Okay, just a suggestion, open question. I was imagining future learning discipline without any reference to the future. In time of high risk, yes, learning disciplines, traditional discipline, without explicit reference to the future, or better, to the futures, there is a risk to harbor reductionism. This is about taking a complex issue and thinking of resolving it by breaking it down. This is the cartoon, of course, is ironically said that if we divide a cow in half, we obtain 2 smaller cows. Of course, it's not that, but often the specialization of discipline conduct us to treat the reality in some way, and sometimes in that way. And the other thing is about short-termism, the excessive focus on the short-term results at the expense of individuals, companies, countries' long-term interests. And another point is about uncritical reasoning, that is taken for granted and shared by the all tacit assumptions. So make an explicit reference to the futures, help to make the tacit explicit, clear, and more shareable, or put in the discussion. Well, now I'll show you a few of recent experience that I have involved and created. A project was about involving that institute, professional institute dedicated to tourism, in terms of tourism marketing, hotelery. We involved 7 classes from 3 institutes, about 120 students, in which the questions were who will be the tourist in the next 10 years, and how will welcome this new kind of tourist. All these we used strategic interviews among the variety of tools from future literacy or future studies and strategic scenarios. And we involved also teachers of student management, territorial marketing, different disciplines involved. But the interesting is about that the students involved also hotel owners, tourism associations. So make an experimentation, open research on the field, on their territory, specifically on Tree Valley of the Alpine area, and then organize a web conference that now we all know, but 4 years ago was a novelty for those institutes. And there was a flipped conference. The students were the speakers, and the surrounding stakeholders were the public. Also, it's interesting in terms of transdisciplinary learning. Other interesting case is about Autumn School of Anticipation, about future-proofing your project. We involved about 80 students from 4 professional and vocational institutes. They all, these classes, the working group, brought the project in terms of new bike trials, bike path, or some specific project to improve their territory with plan and design. And the challenge during these autumn scopes is to think about the failure or success factors in the next 20 years. Your project could be right, perfect for today, but how this project will be affected in a changing surrounding, changing context. And so we use strategic scenarios, system thinking to make explicit assumptions, make it explicit development path of different scenarios. And interesting different discipline design, forestry, biology, natural resource management. And interesting is about co-learning. The teacher also acquired new skills in terms of dealing with the future in an explicit way, and they are using the term future, but also scenarios, a new concept for them in their usual daily teaching. Another example is about a participatory process coordinated by the province government that actually is still writing down the local strategy for sustainable development, and organized participatory phase composed by 12 participatory workshops. And we use a specific tool, the Foresight Future Studies tool, the 3 horizons, in which we visualize not only the next change, but next waves of innovations, so-called 3 horizons, and use also another tool, megatrend assessment. And all these results are now integrated in the governmental document for Agenda 2030. And this all, in this case, was yes, a learning experience, but also a participative experience, unified by the approach in an explicit-oriented, future-oriented approach. Another interesting case is about a really small village. Ospedaleto is a really small municipality of about 400 inhabitants that is living a depopulation, demographic crisis, and themselves, the local schools, the local institution, vocational professional institute, was reflecting about the futures of their community. And so the key question was, why come or live in Ospedaleto in the next 20 years? And I developed strategic scenarios with colleagues from the other classes, but also involving the municipality council in this futures thinking exercise. And also involving different disciplines, spatial planning, tourism management in this case. Another thing, another practice, another application was about conflict. In the Alps, due to megatrend in terms of climate change, due to increasing of tourism and over-tourism, so congestion, and but also with interest about wildlife protection, there are signals, weak signals for the moment, but showing that the trend or megatrend that conflict may increase in the next future in terms of conflict between uses of forests. And so we involved about 50 students from different classes in a local agrarian agricultural science institute, and invited them to reflect about the impact of the megatrend, the local impact of megatrend, this global trend, and use system thinking to disentangle, to identify possible synergy, a cumulative effect, or processes that may foster, cause conflicts, or may mitigate conflict. And so using this elicited process to propose specific intervention. And discipline interested in this case for forestry, natural resource management, agricultural science. Also in this occasion, the student and the teacher involved the expert, the practitioners, the professionals on the field, as foresters, as agriculture, as local associations, to have also not only a reasoning, reflection, but also concrete, real information from the field, from the real context, from the market, from the social context. And last summer, we also organized a specific branch of future literacy, system thinking. So we organized a summer school for system thinkers, in which use a variety of tools from system thinking concept of a system thinking paradigm to understand the complexities of the territories. So we also organize reading newspaper and identify the system structures. This identification of these systems literacy, also called, allow to distinguish the development path of different futures. So is interrelated with systems future literacy. The last interesting project, really ambitious, was involved a large valley here in northern part of Italy, Valtellina, 140 kilometers, scattered municipalities, and we try to involve different are in different sectors of this valley in 6 one-day workshops. In the morning involving the schools, in the afternoon involving the economic actors, and the evening involving the population, the local population, the local municipal villages or village or municipality population. So involve 10 institutes in so-called futurals, and we use also tools from design thinking and strategic scenarios. In this case, we included disciplines as economics, tourism studies, and local governance, in which they visualize and draw postcards from the futures, and use this postcard as a trigger question from the local actor, from the economic actor, for example, hotel owners or the tourism association or agriculture association or local firms association, to questioning their actual planning. And so the student question the current planning, asking question as, is your plan robust to the different scenarios? Because the scenarios are as possible, and they considered, for example, climate change that in Alpine region is going to have a huge impact, and all the other related, for example, demographic also trend are causing different impact to different sectors, to different economics and social dimension. These are a couple of postcards, of course, artifact and easy visualization, simplified visualization of possible scenarios. Well, just to conclude my short contribution, future literacy support real application and learning of different contents, having the timeline, the time perspective, enable deeper reflection and deeper understanding of also the disciplines, because integrate them with critical thinking skills, metacognitive self-awareness and awareness of change, and being naturally inclusive about when we speak and reason about the future inevitability. Naturally, we include different dimensions, different disciplines. And so being naturally inclusive, challenge-based, practice-oriented, it helps to develop communities and education system. And we saw, just to rapid overview of these cases, those communities involved in experience of future literacy are now a little bit more prepared to push the present towards the desirable futures. Well, thanks for your attention. I remain available for if you have a question.
Thank you so much. I think if there are any questions, they'll be presented in the chat. So please, for the interpreters, please do translate these questions later. And maybe then I hope Rocco will answer whether in writing or will present it in some way later. We have questions actually that were asked in English. So so we can do that. We can do one question.
Okay, I see one about the main sources of information which are using.
One question. It has to do with information for analysis.
Yeah. Okay. It depends of the level of.
How do you create the foundation for the original information? How the local participants are using and how the local seminar participants actually use this foundation at the seminars.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's depend of about the project, because in some case was only a pilot project just to make an experimentation of these new approaches. So the experts were selected by the school, by the institution, by the professors. So not were selected by us, by the team of teachers that already knows the expert surrounding their context. In another occasion where the content were more important because part of a wider process, also the selection of experts was shared with the project group. So, for example, in one case was selected by the municipality council because already networked, already connected with those stakeholders. So, depend of the project, depend of the desired, expected use of the contents. In some cases, was only a teaching or learning experience. In other cases, was a participatory process. Well, I see what is the evidence of future literacy in teaching? Okay.
Rocco, thank you so much for your answer.
Perfect.
Maybe you could refer us
Okay,
to a few articles on this matter, so we can post them on our site, and whoever is interested may be able to get familiar with these materials as well in more detail. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So from now on, I'd like to pass the floor to the next speaker. It's Vagine Markovic Rosen, head expert with the Philosophy Institute with the Russian Academy of Sciences, with a paper, Ecosystem Approach, as one of the ways and means to renew and transform the modern education system. I'd like to say before Vadim Markovic starts, I'd like to mention a few points, because as it was promised, we have heated discussions in our chat taking place. So I'd like to make 2 points of emphasis here. First of all, I very much hope that this at our 4th conference, we're not going to reproduce this false dichotomy between Western education and the Russian education, and we all understand that when we speak of continued education and being aware of all the new trends, we're just looking at the broader area of cultural practices, and it doesn't matter whether it's in Russia or elsewhere. And more so, we have 8 sections and 14 master classes where we'll be analyzing our Russian experience from the continued education standpoint. And the second emphasis I'd like to make, we already have heard a few papers where we can see this choice, turning point. We either think of forecasting and making a stake on certain competencies, stating that they'll be the key in the future in the continued education in the future's context. Or we understand that we need to think of the competencies and literacies that have to do with being within continued education. It's about being open to learn new things, develop new competencies. I think it's very important to keep this dilemma, both its sections and the master class. Just 2 little inserts, a bit of a reflection that I'd like to know for our participants. And so now we're moving on. So now I would like to pass the floor to Vadim Markovic. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you quite well. Yeah, I can hear and see well. So actually, I have learned about ecosystem approach in education quite recently. So to me, it's quite natural to try to understand what it is. More so, I think that even the 2 papers that we've heard today actually raise this issue. What is it? Is there anything in common in this ecosystem approach, or is it? Are we just speaking of? or it's just notions taken from a range of disciplines. So what is ecosystem approach in education? Is there any invariant in those? What connects representative of ecosystem approach in terms of ideals? And the second question is also quite acute, and as we were listening to this Baranikov paper, it's quite obvious. So what is education then? Because from what we've heard, you can quite tell that the actual idea of education just seems to vanish. Yes, groups. Yes, lots of content in electronic systems, but is the student or the young man is supposed to move on his own? On what direction is he supposed to move in? Are we losing the very idea of education here? And if not, so how does it need to be stated then? So when we think of with ecosystem approach in education, so those are the two questions that come to mind that I think need to be answered. So, as I was I very much like the article, Ashrieff article, where he writes that the ideas of educational ecosystems are becoming widespread in the Soviet teaching practice after Foresight Agency, Strategic Initiative Agency conference, but they're accepted by the academic community is provided by their open informational space, continued education, and within the context of all throughout the lifetime. And he also notes that ecosystem approach in education it picks up on the ideas of environment approach and the ideas of culturological approach. So partially during our first and actually second paper, we've seen that yes, actually, as an environment approach, culturological approach, ideas of modernity and the future. So those are very contemporary ideas. So I can agree that that this system approach in education picks up on this ideas of environment and culturological approach, ideas of personology and individualization. So all of that is present. But it seems to me that in order to understand what it is, we need to consider the actual ecosystem approach in a broader sense, because that's what it all started with, on one hand. And on the other hand, we need to consider the crisis of modern education that sets a ground and an environment for the execution of the ecosystem approach. So looking at the literature, the formulation of ecosystem approach was influenced by the following circumstances. It became obvious that the human activity needs to be consider the knowledge of biological and social life, that objects of activity are complex organic systems, many of which include a man. The change of this system is provided not only by the interaction and mutual influence of the life forms and materials presented, but also external structures, which is crucial, including the human activity. So in order not to destroy these systems, in order to develop them in a directed way with minimum negative consequences, we need carefully considered management. So those crucial principles were transferred into the area of education, in my opinion, that towards the close of the past century started experiencing radical changes. The state schools is no longer and key subject of organization and upbringing of education and upbringing. So we will cite a very interesting statistic: more than a million and a half families educate their children outside of the school. No less influenced are the internet, the family, and other educational institutions, and the social system in general. As a result, autonomy and exclusivity starts to blur out of the school. It became the subject of social changes. More and more, it becomes more and more obvious that the model of an average student, the only uh, uh, correct systematic education system, is obsolete. A new variety of formats of education take place. Tutoring, family system, inclusive, open, integrative education. It's already been mentioned in our papers. That actually presumes creation of an environment that initiates activities and self-education for young person, creating conditions for various trajectories of development for various personality. Uh, we initiate the search for new ideas and worldviews that allow us to ponder on the changes in education and find ways of renewing education and learning. And it's very appropriate here to take on the ecosystem approach ideas. But the issue here is not quite easy either. How do we project ecosystem concepts on the education? Is one thing is land use for a community, and the other thing is education. The analysis conducted that shows two variants of transfer of the use application of ecosystem approach in education. The first approach could be called a model approach. Here we can say that ecosystem can be used as a model to ponder on the changes in education, and that's so. We need equivalence of all of the terms and relationships that exist in ecosystem approach, and to explain the connections between the various systems and subsystems. We use a term of energy, material, information carriers, similar to an informational lesson. Lack of such methodology is trying to match objects from two completely different areas, which makes me want to agree with Astriev's critique of this approach. At least there's a question of whether it's possible, or there's a question of the direct use of biological terminology to explain educational phenomena. End of quote. The second, let's call it heuristic, because in this case, ecosystem ideas are used not as a model, but as a heuristics of sort, like a new optics. The article, Astriev's article, is a good example of thinking of education. He uses ecosystem approach as images, analogies, analysis schemes, while keeping the same terminology used in education. Yet such works is applied only to what Astriev called organizational technological modernization. That's a very important approach, because its ecosystem approach is geared at modernization, modernization, to the technological issues. A heuristic approach could be considered as weak methodology. Weak because it's not a reflected approach. Based just on the skillfulness of the author, but it's still a methodology, because it allows to implement the new means of analysis and research. But passing this approach to others is quite difficult. That's a whole other issue. So in my opinion, ecosystem approach in education is used first of all as a model for new education, but that's quite problematic. And second, and then set the new lens, a new object, and serves as a weak methodology. We also have to we have to we have to think of how to present objects in education. So both examples sets us gives us opportunity to create a new ideal object. Ideal because authors thought of education as having specific traits. Did the authors manage to provide the functions needed for ideal objects? The answer can only be negative here because they were not aware of the need for such work. So the objects they've constructed need to be considered for discrepancies, whether they're to see whether they're possible to solve the problems faced, and whether to see whether they're aware of the trends. And here we have to see a vital flaw of ecosystem approach in education, and let's quite ambiguous. On one hand, terms and strategy are not yet specified and have not been thought of that much. And on the other hand, the very idea of education vanishes. It just becomes very uncertain and problematic. So we speak of the first. And what systems and subsystems we speak of. When we speak of ecosystem approach, we're talking about two quite different cases. Education is a social institute, state, family, business, law. Education is a social institution that where anthropological factor plays quite a role. Education is an activity. So when we spoke of activities today. Education is pedagogical and student community. Education is practices of learning and self-learning and upbringing. All of these systems are quite different, and they and have different kinds of interconnection and mutual influence between them. And another example. The word design is used often in ecosystem approach. What design we speak of? Ecosystem projects are, first of all, social projects, and to execute social projects, it takes quite complex technologies, and we're facing quite serious issues. For example, our analysis of execution of social projects has shown the following. The social projects are more or less successful if enough resources are provided to develop and execute such a project, including the blocking of subjects who will seek to misuse these subjects, which is very important for our country. There are disciplines that allow to analyze and constitute the projects, design projects. So managed to it happens if the team is formed, which normally should include methodologists that create schemes for the design objects and to develop execution strategy and provide methodological assistance. The efficacy of methodological schemes and projects is provided by how well social problems is determined, whether the demand in the community, and whether there's a methodological help provided. These development analysis of creation of ecosystems takes a lot of many other disciplines and kinds of activities. If we were to speak of the second circumstance, we can say that for instance, some groups are organized. There is a huge educational contest. Issues are raised. But who works on these issues? Who develops the contact? Who develops the trajects? What direction are they planning to move in? So if we were to emphasize individualization, personalization, an opportunity to take various trajectories, if we speak of freedom that needs to be kept, if we keep a teacher as a companion, So what is education then? Where do we go? Who directs it all? Is it the student? Where does he get the ideas and resources from? So it's a very important issue that we cannot fail. We cannot, if we don't answer, we cannot speak of ecosystem education. So that's why. So there are two major issues here, and it's some from here we can presume.
So we have to understand that the first stage should be followed by the second stage. And based on this approach, we have to create certain definitions that will allow us to have a full-fledged environment that will serve as a methodological plan of the modern philosophy of education that is oriented on the enhancement of today's education. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vadim Markovic. In your talk, you asked very important questions that cannot be got around by other talkers and in other sections. Thank you very much for that. In particular, Tatiana Vladimirovna, do we have any questions, key questions, Vadim Markovic? Yes, we have one key question that is, what are the institutional changes as results of implementing the institutional approach? Institutional changes. I have this. First of all, we have to understand what institutional changes are. Changes that turn real processes into utilization that may not coincide with the institutional requirements that is. So this is the situation that I would say on one hand there is the institution of school education that reproduced, it can be reproduced and dictates certain requirements in terms of program, and at the same time, on the other hand, we have the process of developing new schools, new systems of education, tutors, movement, tutorship, tutor schools. It's systemic experiments in education, family education in one way or another. So the question is, what institutionalization is in this case? I believe that we are in a sort of interesting situation today when school as a social institute that's been already established, that is connected to the state. School as an institute must react to these spontaneous processes that are taking root today and taking place. It's important. It requires discussion by itself in the pedagogical community, what's going on, and the formulation of new requirements for the Institute of Education. Thank you. In your, well, as we're speaking about institutionalization, we can hear the sound of school life behind you. That's quite symbolic. There's certain questions that also were asked in the chat. I would like to ask you, while you were speaking, to check out those questions, maybe provide some answers to them. In the meantime, we are moving forward. The floor is being turned to your choice, Key, and because his talk is the approach and lifelong learning and anthropological perspective, I really hope I really hope that it will address what we talked about. Thank you very much. And I'm really happy to participate in this conference with this very important questions and very interesting content. Going back to the beginning of the Markovic talk,
I would like to say he completely correctly mentioned something. Generally, when a philosopher is forming certain attitude based about the organization of education, it's extremely important in terms of orientation. And he spoke about what grounds there are to transfer the ecosystemic initiative ecosystem onto the area of education. And I must say that the problems of understanding is very important. It's been being developed as we speak everywhere. Recently, we just received Russian translation famous book that is exactly this issue, the cultural transfer. So there's not a problem that I would like to mention that I hear. Uh, I I I was thinking. I understand that this issue is extremely similar to how understood in the cases in Varela, Latin American Latin American biologists wanted to transfer the idea of the existence of biological system from the social piece, and I believe that. And the main principles are self-development of the system and its own resources. And here the key factor, Generativism actually asked according to its question when it was the self when she gave an interview prior. Very important question. What is the energetics, generally speaking? When we're talking about the ecosystemic approach to education, and Mikhail Yurovich, may I ask you a question? Somehow I cannot open this thing for some reason. So, colleagues, it's quite symbolic of Homo sapiens to Homo erectus. So, I would like to show you certain aspects of that. So, the uh, properties of learning about this, it's mostly the properties of the cognitive act itself. This epistemological anthropological position is interaction. Main content, lifelong learning that we call learning throughout life, is ecosystemness of ways of cognitive activity individual. And here you can see a little bit counterposition between knowledge. What is the ecosystemic nature of cognitive thing? Sometimes it's called a transdisciplinary approach, which is using analytical instruments and methods in various scientific areas of knowledge, occasionally rather remote from each other, as gains, as methods of understanding. And basically, I believe the word is understanding became quite a cut definition. Complex central definition. Why do we counter knowledge and instruments? I will relate by knowledge and by instruments within ways of working with various information flows and phenomena. And of course, understanding it includes explanation. But because every approach is born within the framework of methodology, a complicated rather problem appears of combining various approaches. As we understand, the main idea, the main basis of coexistence for various approaches becomes not so much the complementary nature as the productive conflicts. Speaking about conflict, it was productive beginning from the structural approaches, the binary system. After that, it was continued. The idea was not so much about condition as it was about difference and differentiation, which is a softer form of counter. One way or another, the effectiveness of epistemological system can be defined by non-triviality of received results that usually have emergence effect. I genuinely to that the emergency effect and complex systems we have a certain super meanings that are not parts and elements of the super meaning. It's very interesting phenomenon in the culture. When Anna composed her poet of poems, she can calculate just how each particular poem, short poem, change the reader's perception of the next one. So, as we can see, the combination of those is not equal to the combination of meanings, the super meaning that has the whole. So this is a sort of emergency effect that I'm talking about. And long life learning be represented as the movement of activities as moving from particular elements to the ecosystematic ensemble of strategies that allow to understand the meaning of the anthropological elements. So, if knowledge dominates here, such as in big education institutions, not only a collection of empirical knowledge, but also the simple, not only the simplest, but simple types of causation. For example, causation sequence, cause and result sequence, and the theoretical knowledge as well. It's also a part. It's a part of this. So as a post-university education, what dominates, especially when we talk about the like institutional-based education, where it goes to self-trajectory, it's instrumental one that becomes, that starts to dominate, and the knowledge that is before, as before that, it kind of feeds this, it provides basis to this process. Next slide, please. Humanitarian literacies must be open for personal meanings and ideas of learners, for people who are educating, self-educating themselves, and the meanings here can be complementary. They can interact in a complementary way with the subject content, but the intensity of course is, and that will be a perfect case when this implicit ego meanings are sort of get dissolved in the subject content. They saturated within without changing its traditional ideas. And here we cannot avoid the understanding of meaning. This understanding is so element, just like we talk about culture. And it's difficult to define it in a simple, logical way. These understandings, the productiveness of meaning, in this is that these definitions do not require any satisfaction, comprehensive satisfaction of definitions. They are productive in their under interpretation, their under definition, I will say, in non-defining way. So this can be also represented as quantum of understanding, quantum understanding what's particular meaning that we may be talking about now. The potential polysemantic nature of it, potential implicit multi-meaningful nature, and the meaning, it always includes associative sequences and laws of achieve this meaning, as well as various emotional states. And of course, meaning is a kind of project of the future, of the future meaning. And I said no, Ober is not proud to augment this future nature of it. And well, it's if we further extend the biological analogy, the methodological comparison, biological comparison, what is it that provides for self-development of the system? What provides for the energy that Anna Mikhailovna spoke about in the famous interview? Well, I think that this is the possibility, and I have to follow out the constructive criticism. It's a possibility of the transformation of knowledge and experience of the individual into another instrumental entity, so to speak. And I believe that before the active core of education, self-education, is the ability of the person to transform knowledge and experience into. Here's an example. Here's an example that actually happened to me. when reading the narratives of foreigners about Russia over the past several years, and just not only countries, I realized the certain commonality, certain connection, even though stylistically they were different.
Just as more developed. So up to the 20th century, this was so. It was seen as it was a dominant for foreigners' narratives about countries' superiority. Also, it's also quite obvious that practically every sentence of such narratives of foreigners about other countries and it's very developed. Very developed semantic part, and if we would use a qualitative method, it's much bigger than the thematic part. But at least any freshman hermetic analysis is actually a hermetic part that's quite well presented in foreigners' narratives about other countries, in the way people speak of other countries, and then we can come to a conclusion that the texts of people about other cultures are constructed with the use of metaphorical strategy, boosted by a hermetic component. A metaphorical strategy boosted by hermetic context, with all of the theoretical. With the way this thesis is quite practical with all those theoretical nature. And why? Because it's an actual tool for understanding of how foreigners' narratives are constructed and the lyricism of these texts. Its points of relevance, but as well as distorted perceptions that are quite common in these texts. But knowing the distortion ratio, we can introduce a correction and thus learn relevant information as we read travelers' notes, diaries, and other similar works by people visiting other countries. So if the cognitive process of a subject on transformation of knowledge into tools of understanding of phenomena of the world around us and cultural artifacts will become a factor in one's intellectual activity, one could quite well consider it a source of educational self-development of a person. Mikhail Yuryich, can I ask, can you show the next slide, please? Personas, personality. So here's what we see an attempt to present this formula. Presents the formula. As we accumulate such experience, one can presume that a person of understanding, Homo investigans, can construct an organic balance of knowledge and tools, presuming that each of the so-called new literacies, a number of which keeps growing. I think Tatiana spoke of about 50 new literacies. So now it can be presented as an instrumental plane. So now in our school of understanding, that that is actually based on generative didactics, we are completing work on instrumentalization of media literacy. And about media literacy, I spoke of media literacy at our last conference, and And in the future will be, and we'll talk about future literatures, the approaches that I can see as potential that is well developed by American intellectual Michael Epstein, with whom we have a solid working relationship. Next slide, please. So the principle of generativism means speaks of a transition from descriptive schemes and models to generative models. So the most effective mechanism of such transformation, going from direct description to inception, are such products as generators, constructors, and navigators. I intentionally emphasized three kinds of products that actually can quite well present themselves. For instance, a constructed navigator, the first in Russia, generator of neologisms and concepts. I think it's the next slide, Mikhail Yuryevich. Okay, and the next one, yes. Here's a generator of neologism and concepts that we have put together a few months ago. It was presented at the Russian Language Institute with leading specialists on word generation. So the output of this generator is about 100,000 lexical units, neologisms. So any person can generate his own neologism. So we've made two options. A traditional option, that's the green, when the morphemes, when the person chooses a morphemes, and the second one, the orange option, we called it quants of meaning. So those are groups of Greek and Latin morphemes that are of similar meaning that give a complete list of words generated. So what is the essence of this thing? So we only know of one precedent of such a generator in England a few years ago, and it's quite simple. It only uses two words. A generator breaks them down into morphemes and combines them. So we have a great number. We have practically all of the Greek and Latin morphemes in our database, and their combinations provide these practically 98,000 possible new words. So it's almost the essence of what has to do with practically a philosophical upset. If we have a habitual sequence where first we create a certain phenomenon and then a thing, and then it is given a name, the generator of such type allows to create an epistemological inversion of sorts, where first a person generates a nominative of complex nature, and of course about 50%, 50, 60, 70% could make perhaps of you get a verbal garbage because it's an electronic generator. But among these words, there are some nominations that, when you think of them, point at phenomena yet to be created. Things not that were not created yet. So first the name, and then the construction of a phenomenon with the semantics of the name in mind. So let us move on then. The most how much more time need, because we're running out of time now. So I guess I'll just say a few words really briefly. Yes, of course, literally a minute. So this is navigator understanding of history that includes three constructs. Can you see the next slide, please? There are plenty of other things as well. So it's a electronic navigator. Next slide, please. So the first constructor, that's part of it. It's my heritage. And this is where a user can write himself in, his parents and generations, and he can count the depth of his family memory based on the number of names known, generations known. So that's my heredity. So next, our family insignia. So there's a whole library of various options for putting together a family insignia, and you can see a number of generations gather here, and discussing and constructing their family insignia. And the third generator, a constructor I'm very proud of, it's called the Formula of War. The idea was created a long time ago, but we managed to find a person that studies military history. Found a person who have managed to execute this idea. So I'm about to. Those are my a few words in conclusion. So I'd like to say that if universities are able, and that's quite realistic, to train students to train people to teach the transformational models of transfer knowledge into tools. I just really in the layman's term, it's a lot more subtle than that. So if they manage to do that, that means that any person may get an instrument approach, and instruments do not go obsolete as fast as knowledge does. Gets lifelong learning education tools by expanding the range of one's tools. So I guess I'll draw the line at that. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Yuri Lvovich. So now, actually, so now we have the most important part, content-wise. I don't know whether it will be successful or not. We're about to start a plenary discussion. So we have about 30 minutes for our plenary discussion, and I hope that Kirill Barannikov is with us. Is Kirill with us? Kirill Anatolyevich, it would be very nice if you'd be here. So please, Vadim Markovic, put on the video. Mr. Yuvalovich, please turn on your camera, and Tatiana Vladimirovna, so we can. So we can feel as though we have a virtual round table here, and hopefully Kirill Anatolyevich will also be joining us. So the way we want to, this is how we'd like to organize our discussion. Well, first of all, I'd like to pass the floor to our jubilary speakers, and would like to speak of some acute issues related to the speakers' papers heard so far. And then our track moderator, Tanya Yakubovska. Our moderators are in the working in the chat. She has selected some of the more acute general questions that will be presented to you speakers. So who do we start with? Let us start with Vadim Markovic, perhaps. Your question to Yuri Lvovich, and then Yuri Lvovich will reply. So it's not so much of a question, actually. I think that the actual it's quite a right move here, because the main trend of the end of the 20th century has to do with the transfer of knowledge into instruments, and the methodological movement was all founded on that. So it seems to me it's quite correct to me. The only thing I'd like to draw attention to is I think there is a problem with idea, as it was said, on behalf of semantics, when creating inceptive terms on behalf of semantics. And the reason I say that is because right now, in Philosophical Science magazine, I just published a review on a dictionary on Epstein and Tuchinski library. Oh yeah, that's the old one. Have you seen the new humanitarian sciences? Yeah, they're publishing a new one, a new edition. No. That's an old dictionary. They made it about 10 years ago. Now Epstein had created a project of dictionary of humanitarian sciences, and it featured various sciences for the first time. So I'm just discussing the actual idea of a projective dictionary, design dictionary, and that's where we're just discussing the issue. I tried to show that there's a bilateral movement. On one hand, it has to do with the construction of the name, and then there's a reflection on the semantics, and only at the interception uh, of these two, uh, we we start establishing new terms, new notions. And the second thing I'd like to say, I received two interesting questions in my chat. One question is from Vyacheslav Gennadievich Murach, where he writes that ecosystem came to education not as a model and not as a weak methodology, but as a metaphor. And it did not arrive directly, but through an organization of an innovatory activity. A term innovation ecosystem was coined, uses the idea of a symbiosis between the various participants as factors of synergy. In my opinion, if we were to speak of the transference of models and methodology into education, the source is not the ecology, but the innovation studies. I may not be quite clear here, but maybe I wasn't clear enough, but when I spoke of the first approach, the model approach, I meant applied practice. It's not. It doesn't have to do with my convictions on how it's to be considered. There's actually a method that interprets transfer in this way. And when I spoke of weak methodology, that's also something that takes place. I'm not a proponent of weak methodology. I'm a proponent of proper methodology, strong methodology. And Andrei Alexandrovich Terev also writes, does it make sense to combine both approaches to ecosystem and education, both optical and model? Once again, I speak of normal methodology, and as part of normal methodology, as I indicate, actually, it becomes quite important, the issue of objective ecosystem approach, and it's here where it's not a matter of it being a model. It has to do with the constitution of this model, creation of this model, with the consideration of the issues of and opportunities. The projects and their executions and so forth. So that's something that's worth mentioning, I think. And regarding what Vyacheslav said, I would like to say that yes, perhaps I did speak of it. Innovation studies, innovatics, as a mean of execution and construction of the new. But ecology in this case was also quite an important notion here. It just need to be understood correctly, not in an ontological way, but also as a special methodology. And in that sense, once again, both model and the other methodology can be considered as a metaphorical discourse, but I think it's easily solved by a proper humanitarian methodology. And the final thing I'd like to say, I'd like to get back to Baranikov's note. I think it's quite symptomatic and indicative, because on one hand he cited quite interesting examples of completely new means of education, new approaches in education, and in the end, he said that it's all has to do with ecosystems. That's what ecosystem approach is all about. Yes, but I'd like to emphasize once again that it's not quite clear what is education then. What is education made up of? So yeah, we have groups. Yeah, but where is the human being? Where is the person? Why do we insist on means of activity? When we accentuate means of activity, groups, projects, we lose the human being. We lose the communications where there is a instructor, perhaps in a new role and function, but he's present. We lose the direction. the influence of these things, the impact that they may not only originate from the teacher, but they also may come from the student, from the person, or it could be something in common. But where is it all moving? Where it's all directed towards? So who is the person that raises the problems, and what are they related to? So let us give the speakers give the opportunity to answer. Yes, so thank you. So what's your question?
So then it will be your question as well. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. But I would like, yes. I would like to say that perhaps Vladimir Markovic, as I suspect, believes that ecosystems is completely identical. Maybe I didn't completely understand to the old and productive semiotics, deep semiotics from mozzarella, barella, autopoiesis, autopoietic concept of self-development of systems. But whatever, it's pretty much similar. Okay, let's be parallel. But I believe it's generally I was thinking, how I try to construct education systems, their technologies. I believe that it's extremely important to solve a very, very important question, which is what the higher school education is about the correlation of the empirical knowledge, which is getting old and it's replacing everything, and the delayed results of education stop working in 5 years when exactly when they are in demand. So I think that there are alternative knowledge to this unlimited knowledge is exactly the instrumental approach. The instruments will be constructed, tuned, and I believe that this balance of this instrument and this institutionalized education should be moved towards instrumental. They are way of understanding of objects and phenomena and cultural artifacts and the world. I believe that this is my idea fix, so to speak. Thank you very much. As for Vadim Markovic, could you answer that shortly? What is very interesting imbalance? I would say balance versus the analytical report of Branikov. I already checked him for the second time. It was so great. Unfortunately, he's not with us. I hope that he will be able to see that. So I have my own question. Um, uh, he is now in vacation. Okay, he's on vacation. All right. So he will be there later. My question is to speakers, and the question was discussed in the chat as well. Look, system of Russian education we consider within the cultural active approach and developing education as a culture penetrated already the system of education and the active approach. There's no clear differentiation between knowledge and instruments. What knowledge is actually what we receive, and as both of you are dividing it into knowledge and instruments, well, what do you include in knowledge? The definition knowledge that is different from ways of its acquisition.
Well, that's important to clarify now. Well, thank you, Tatiana Mikhailovna, and me, I think it's a principle of differentiation. From my point of view, it's very productive. Knowledge, generally speaking, answers the question what, and the instruments generally answer the question how. Well, Zilmovich, at this point, the question is being asked as we speak. The question what answers is answered by information, by knowledge, do you understand by particular data? So is it for you? What are you talking about in this case? Well, I'm talking about the chain first, data. That is a different flow of information. Then, when data is primary, it's classified as a typical typological information, and then this information, if it's interpreted, if it's understood, it's it goes. It's the Trek meaning, right? Vygotsky said if it's by the learner's intellect, it becomes a new knowledge, and understanding, as Vygotsky said, it's transfer alienated meanings of knowledge into personified uh, meanings of understanding, and then those meanings get verbalized. They are put in knowledge, in verbs, uh, in language, but they're put in language, of course. It's the meaning gets distorted, of course, as a result of it being within the frame of verbal language, and it becomes communication. Communication. And many years ago, we put together the words activity and communication in parallel. So it shows us that communication becomes an ontological phenomenon that has its own body, its own resistance, and it cannot be understood as a means. It has its own entity. And yes, it's communicative active approach. That's how we call it, correct? Vladimir, please, could you please answer that, and then we'll go for Vladimir. Understand that we both belong to the active approach. No, I didn't say each system belongs. Okay, whatever. That way, but I would like. So I'm a representative of the circle, and working for 10 years kind of active approach. I came out with this approach. I believe that that's not the main, that's not the main pathway for the education. It's just the question is complicated because here we have two completely big traditions. The knowledge tradition, it goes to the antique time. Goes to the question of becoming traditions and creating non-contradictory thinking, and that's what period is. And the active is a totally different approach. It comes. How about Plato? Is meiosis? Is it knowledge? I don't know. I don't know. When this question is the Russian methodological school, Latyshev said, we should teach not knowledge, we should teach thinking. It was the end of the 19th century. He said that we should teach not knowledge but to think. And that's where this idea already was. Right, it was growing about moving it to the instrumental way of thinking, to the way of knowledge. Tatiana is correct. Knowledge was also interpreted with the cognitive active approach, yes? This is a big problem for me as well. And what I would like your attention to is that despite the fact that my idea of moving at the ontological to the instrumental and the whole thinking, well, I guess nevertheless it became hard to realize that, to implement that, because most of the educational content is represented by the theoretical forms, but into the knowledge, the particular form has to be conducted. That was not conducted. It was partly conducted by particular researchers, but researchers generally not totally done. And pedagogues moved to the old ways of representing knowledge, theoretical knowledge, and for a long time it's been already clear that it doesn't work that way. Well, we here we do not have the priority to finalize the points. I would like to see your attitude. That's what's important. Your opinion. That's what's important for you to express the opinions. Now, Tatiana Vladimirovna, you have 10 minutes that it remains in the section. Yes. Was it put out the screen? Did it come out on the screen? Yes. Okay, maybe I will speak like this. There's 5 groups of questions that should be discussed in the future. The main question is about the ecosystems question. Слышно плохо. I cannot hear, unfortunately. The second question is switch on the microphone. Second question is about the function of this system. It's definition that is worth considering. Just why we want to introduce this. What cognitive problems we should eliminate, and why we cannot do without that. And there's a question here. Let's not falterize this biological process. Next, okay, so this is about definition, right? And the next question is, there were several ideas expressed about principles the ecosystem has. The synergy idea in innovation platforms related to the informal knowledge exchange and the systematic approach that can allow us to discuss information conditions with special technologies. This is also what we can be discussing, and it's connected to the next point, which is the construction of the institutional knowledge, education in this ecosystematic approach. How the ecosystematic approach creates those ideas, and of course, a new plot is the question that apparently is the program, and that's a very good question. That the program perhaps we have to initiate the ecosystematic approach of the formational structure of education. and the ecosystem approach principle that allows to develop new possibilities within the education system. Where are the limits? How far the possibilities? Well, I believe that it's a very interesting topic of questions. We can expand it, we can enlarge it, and other people can join the discussion. Okay, I believe that this is a good result of the first track. Very, very good. Yeah. Yeah, I believe that questions are really good, and they are well on the entire content. We have for maybe like very short time for everyone. Do we have short thesis? Okay, Yuri Lovich and then Vladimir Markovic will finalize. Well, it was very, very good points. Biologist is, concerns with the structure of original term. When we get used, we have to agree about where the the nominative in metaphorical transfer. We have to understand that metaphorical usage of knowledge that is taken in ecology and biology, and the most normative here, as I believe, is the definition that is known in mathematics. Paula will understand me. The definition of isomorphism is can be a totally different thing. Unfortunately, the sound is not very good. So it's a little bit difficult. Okay, but we answer the questions in the chat that the definitions start living their own life and move from one sphere of knowledge to another one. We have to understand that this is mostly focusing on new objects, as Markovic said. So they live metaphorically, as we're talking about space. Of course, we are not discussing the like mathematics, the space characteristics in the. Well, no, I'm talking about isomorphism and the approaches. Either it's a metaphorical or isomorphic understanding of the new field. The adequate of biology and education not these are different areas. Education, we can also talk about who is whom. Well, first it's the subject motivation and also target orientation and the possibility of the knowledge into instruments. Okay, Vadim Markovic, perhaps we will be thinking about that. But Vadim Markovic, your last, I believe that those were good questions, and despite the fact that the systemic approach is not clearly defined, I believe that it's important. First of all, because constantly changing the both the education and the ways of solving problems. On the other hand, education and it's not limited to institutions. It becomes an integral part of our institutions and teaching these. On the other hand, it's a new wave of individualization. Yeah. So, and on the other hand, we today understand the different ways of development, social construction methodology, changes the attitude and the ecosystem system approach. It works for this new business. that it should be moved further. And second, this is the area, as I believe, where it's important to use methodology. It allows us to put problems in front of us, the realization. So this is where it should be working. Okay, colleagues, dear colleagues, we came.
We've come to the close of the first track. It's 12:30. Yes. So
12:30.
our concerns are behind us.
Would like to.
Because we have some important issues raised here that will be treated, and I hope they'll be referred to by the other speakers. And we'll continue our work, and we'll complete it tomorrow, the final plenary meeting tomorrow, because the questions are quite acute and very vital. So now we have a 10-minute break. Everyone can take a little break, have some tea or coffee, and we'll start with our second track in 10 minutes. From the very start, I'd like to say, so it's not reproduced in our chat. Please do not worry, dear colleagues. All of the plenary papers and even the masterclass papers will be recorded, and they'll be within a week. They'll be posted at the continuous education site with the Moscow State Pedagogical University. Everyone will be able to listen to the papers once again. Listen to the Q&A, and of course, it's quite important, as it's well noted by Vagine Markovic, that an ecosystem approach is not yet well developed. Those are only the first steps, but it being a resource for raising some vital issues in modern education, that is something that is clearly grasped here. So it's a very important start.